Hey friends, I jumped on real quick because I want to talk a little bit about again Uranus and Gemini and what's going on with the collective consciousness and the shift that I think that is here. And um, and I think this is a good example of how Uranus can be working within the confines of Gemini. So this morning I had a session with Sheila, who is one of my teachers. Um, and she's a channel, and she was talking about that she felt like the 15th, which is today, something big was going to happen, but it had kind of changed in the momentum that it wasn't going to be an explosion, but just like an energy, and it was going to be pretty smooth. And she doesn't study astrology, so when these things come in, she'll usually reach out and we'll chit chat. So, um, and so I was explaining to her that with so many planets going retrograde, so we have Pluto retrograde in Aquarius, Neptune and Saturn retrograde in Aries, and then Mercury's about to go retrograde on the 17th, so we're 2 days out. It'll station on the 17th in I keep wanting to say August, but in Leo, okay, it'll go retrograde in Leo, and so Mercury will stay retrograde in Leo and then turn direct in Leo. Um, and so what is happening right now in the world isn't going to go away. It's going to keep getting looked at and talked about. And I think this is really important when we think about getting change and having change. And, a lot of us want change, right? And whatever that change looks like to you. And there's been a lot of clashes about what that should be, how it should look like, what it should feel like. And this is when Uranus and Gemini comes in because Gemini oftentimes represents duality because it's the twins. In duality, it's like light, dark, it's things in contrast, right? Um, and so in Uranus is the disruptor. Okay, for simplest terms, the disruptor. It comes in, it disrupts things. It disrupts the status quo. It disrupts how we believe things should have been. It disrupts the way things have been. It is the disruptor. So Uranus is just in Gemini. And then all of a sudden we had, I hate to go down this rabbit hole, but it is what it is. We had this whole case about the Epstein files, and if you guys want to turn off, that's fine. It's okay. Um, and it's okay. But this is a real thing that happened. Okay. So this came up. Um, one political party campaigned on it. And now they're walking everything back. And this is some other things that come up. So if you've ever been in a narcissistic relationship, narcissist will say things, say things, say things, and then when it's time for the rubber to meet the road, they'll walk it back. They'll say they never said it. They'll say it never happened. I don't want this to gaslight anybody, but anyone who's been in that kind of relationships knows this pattern. And that is what is emerging with our current president. Um, and so that in itself is disrupting. Okay, so here comes Uranus, right? And we have to remember Gemini is ruled by Mercury. It's how we communicate. And this isn't to pit people against each other, okay? This isn't that. But if you're observing and you're seeing these things happen, and you're wondering, like let's just say one side's wondering, like, why isn't this getting picked up by the other side, right? There's breaking points or aha moments for groups of people, and things have to keep happening before that final aha moment comes. And it usually comes, from what I can tell, it's usually not, I mean, especially for working with Uranus, it's not what we thought it was going to be, right? Um, and we can fill in all the blanks, like, oh, I thought it was going to be this, that was going to be that. Uranus is the Tower card. And Oh, let me see. Do I have a deck with me? I might go grab one, pause this, but let's keep rolling with it. And so when Uranus is involved, a lot of times they say it's something that comes out of the blue, right? Or the way it's presented, no one knew it was going to land that way. Okay. And so this is where we're at with this Epstein case. And I will tell you this, I believe the survivors, it's important to keep talking about it because I usually don't say this, but we owe these survivors that, okay? But that's just me, but going back to Uranus. And so working with this idea of change and this idea of collective consciousness, and how how things tip the scales. The idea that is being shown isn't, we all think the same thing at the same time, okay? On one level, energetically, that could come in, right? But let's say like, let's just say like with the idea of world peace. So someone's like so many people in the world are holding the idea of world peace. And then the other people that aren't holding that idea of world peace, something happens, and it isn't that they're all of a sudden like, oh God, yeah, world peace is this is it. Something happens, and it takes them that minute to be like, huh? And then they stop. That stops the momentum of that old way of thinking. That stops the momentum of the old paradigm. That stops the momentum of what has always been. This is the idea of that paradigm shift, right? You can get into quantum physics and all that kind of stuff. Go for it. But this is where we're at. There's too many people that's wrapped up in all levels of this. Um, and so when this last scenario came out, you know, and people went, huh? That's that's that Uranus in Gemini. That's that lightning bolt that came out of nowhere. That's that idea of, wait a minute, something, and it could be something's not right, something's different. Um, why am I thinking about this differently? How am I communicating about this differently? That's that Uranus and Gemini. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. What just happened? And I want us to think about this in terms of if you see yourself as a light worker, if you see yourself someone that holds space, if you see yourself as a witch, if you see yourself as just a normal effing person wondering what's going on in the world, wondering why things can't shift or change. Um, and I want this to be more inspirational, to be like, oh, to hold that space in your heart that we don't know what it is that's going to make people go, huh? And stop that momentum. But once that collective, huh, happens, there's no turning back from it. And it's really important to understand this at this time, even if it's still kind of floating in the ethers, because all these planets are retrograde. So when these planets are retrograde, they're going to be going over everything that we're talking about now and everything that's happened in the past. And then guess what? They all turn direct. And guess what we do? We go over again, everything that we're talking about now and what was in the past. So this idea that the Epstein case is going to go away, or I don't know what people are saying. Um, it's not. And the idea that like it's so many layers in the fact that this has been a talking point. And let me just tell you this too. They open those files or whatever you say, everyone is in there. Okay, don't think it's just Republicans or, Democrats. Like everybody's in this. Like human nature is human nature, okay? And we know there's good parts of human nature and we know there's absolutely despicable parts of human nature. So this isn't about um, one side of the aisle or the other. But what we're kind of watching in real time is the unraveling, right, of the patriarchy. We're watching in real time how the matriarchy is holding space for this to happen. We're watching in real time. Like when we talk about like the manosphere and they're all up in arms, but what I see with that and the idea of like women in like 4B and all these feminist movements that came roaring back in 2018 when Uranus was in Taurus, right? Ruled by Venus, that divine feminine, and Uranus just came and tore up all that old ground of patriarchy. And now it's going into Gemini and it's going to start tearing up that old ground of what's being communicated, how we communicate. But also, it's really, to me, with this idea of like collective consciousness and energy, tearing up the old idea that things have to be communicated a certain way in order for things to flip. Okay, we don't know what's going to cause people to flip. And I mean, like, for their to take that pause and be like, well, wait a minute, start to question things, okay, or start to talk about things differently. Um, and when we talk about like duality or things being in like this way or that way, black or white, um, and Uranus coming in there is saying it doesn't have to be black and white. When we say things like two things can be true at the same time. Okay. Yes, right. But how do we work with that energy? How can we communicate what we're feeling to ourselves at that time? Um, you know, and I could say this, like with like like an authoritative figure, they're always saying, this is what's happening. It's like this. It has to be my way or the highway. And the my way or the highway, it's, the highway is being demolished and rebuilt, right? This is all happening in real time. And we can see this, and guys, I can't wait to start using different examples besides our political current political climate. But we can see this in that even with all the immigration stuff, when people are like, "What the hell's happening?" Like we, in the little collective, we were told, you know, immigrants, illegal immigrants, all this stuff, and I don't know why, but it's just how it was. But how people didn't realize like what a huge part of the economy and our neighbors, people are. And again, it's not for me to judge, which is a reminder to me, um, but to observe and notice that other people are waking up to this fact, how we're all interconnected, and what that means when one thing tries to come in and change all that to make it one way. Okay, that one way doesn't work. Okay. And again, if we're talking about duality, um, in either my way or the highway, but also duality in the fact that light and dark, okay, they have to coexist, yin and yang, right? All of these energies have to coexist. Just because, if we were in the light all the time, we would be a little cuckoo. If we were in the dark all the time, we'd be a little cuckoo. So there has to be that balance. And so even if we're talking about duality, things have to come back into balance. The pendulum has swung way too far to one side, and Uranus is going to keep shaking things up, right? To start bringing things back more to the center. Um, And how that comes online is very interesting to me. Um, but I hope it's also interesting to you to see that, in my heart of hearts, I would want the thing about the Epstein case to come on, to wake people up because there is such thing as sex trafficking. There is real thing as like patriarchal and like control and power and all these things. At the same time, though, hopefully people will make that, but maybe people are just like, wait a minute, I believed all this for right now, and I've been with this for 10 plus years, and now they're saying there's nothing to see here. Well, how am I supposed to trust you on anything else, right? Or how can that be? And this is going a little bit aside, and I want you guys to hopefully kind of hold that too. There's so many people that have made their life's work on the Epstein files and the conspiracies for so long. Just to go back and say nothing to see here is is a lot, okay? Because at this point in time, a lot of people are quote unquote waking up, whatever that means, into waking up in the idea of, um, I just saw this girl online and she was talking about like, she said she went to public school, so that's why she didn't have any critical thinking skills. But I went to public school and a state school. I have critical thinking skills, but I digress. But she was telling people like, I just didn't really pay attention. I just took Trump at his word, on and on and on. Okay, and so she voted for him, and now she can see what a mistake that was, right? Um, and so, and again, when I talk about this thing, it's not just like, oh, then we should all just be, you know, Democrats, right? Like, there's still room for improvement. Okay, there's still room to talk. There's still all these things. But in this context, this is what we're talking about. So anyway, she said all this, she's saying this stuff. And so now she's realizing that maybe everything he was saying wasn't real. Okay, so there's that aha. Now, how that might translate into everything, I don't know. Okay, but other people are waking up, and it is this idea that the authoritarianism, right? This one person is going to save everything. Only listen to one thing that they're saying instead of using critical thinking skills. So the fact that all these people have been tied up in this Jeffrey Epstein case, and let me just say this, the Epstein case has been going on since the late 90s, early 2000s. The more you hear about it, it still points a lot back to Trump. Okay, there's a lot of people involved, but him and this guy, no matter what, too many arrows are pointing towards Trump. Um, and like last night on my feed, this Epstein Ranch, Zorro Ranch, which I didn't even know existed, came up. And this video was from 2 years ago, and it came up. And look that stuff up. It's important to keep talking about this because this is real, and not in the case of like you know and then vendetta versus for some people, but it's this idea that we've got to break the idea that power, control, greed, right? Patriarchy, um, this, might makes right, all these things um, preying on people that are vulnerable, right? This stuff that needs to go, right? The way we talk about it needs to go, needs to change, right? Needs to be disrupted. That Uranus and Gemini. Um, and so talk about these things, look at these things. I was just watching Midas Touch, and then I'll wrap it up. And he was saying, Prince Andrew is going to be free, and Roman, the world now, and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, so everything that these people were put in jail for and all the FBI raids and everything that happened with this guy, now they're going to try to make us believe just we're all wrong. That's a lot to unpack. That's a lot to go back on. Like the Queen of England, you know, they have, was it MI6 or whatever? My mom could tell me she's a big James Bond fan. But they too have other systems, and it was like all of them were wrong, and if the whole thing was this, why did he get arrested in the first place? Like this is going to be a lot to walk back. Okay, so I don't want you guys to lose hope or um get bummed out if people, and again, going into the manosphere where, you know, Andrew Schultz is saying things like, I voted for Trump, but everything I voted for, he's not doing. Okay, that's changing that narrative. Um, Even though Project 2025 was out and all the photos of Trump and Epstein were out for years. Okay. And I say that because Saturn's retrograde and Aries, and that's accountability. So there's that. I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself with you guys, but all of that is there. Um, and so moving forward, I'll just say this, moving forward, see where we can and moving forward is hold ourselves accountable How can we make things easier for ourselves? Which I know is kind of like a crazy U-turn, but um, see how we can communicate differently to ourselves and the fact that the scales have tipped. I mean, they energetically they have tipped. Those rescuers coming over from Mexico, right, that were especially trained in floodwaters, saved, the sheriff's family in Texas. And now he's saying, um, come over anytime you can apply for a green card, when before he didn't think like that about, Mexicans, you know? Again, I can't understand how people can't, we're all human. I don't understand how people cannot empathize for other humans. I don't, okay? Because like you treat people how you want to be treated, you know, live, laugh, love, all that stuff. Okay, also they live, laugh, love. So, uh, and it isn't up to me to judge, okay, this sheriff in Texas. Um, but for him and his life journey, this had to happen for him to understand the importance of human life across all borders, across all genders, across all nations. Okay. Those things are happening. He's saying this out loud. That's going viral. And I know I kind of just did judge a little bit right there. Okay. But it's all these things happening simultaneously, right? With Uranus and Gemini. That sheriff had to communicate the way he thinks differently now. Okay. Um, Other people are going to start communicating the way they think differently now. So let this be maybe just like a little observation or an aha to understand that we are we're things are moving into, I would say, a better place. Do we have a long way to go, friends? 100%. But from where things were, and even things that Sheila had channeled to where they are now, even her guides are more impressed with how quickly things are moving and how quickly, um, this is my words, not her words, but how I would say our heart space is opening, towards others. Okay. So that's what I wanted to say about Uranus and Gemini. Um, One other thing I wanted to say, and this is if you guys want to jump off, I totally get it, because this is a little bit of a rant, a little bit about Pluto retrograde in Aquarius. I'll say I can turn it that. Okay, so there seems to be this trend going around where people who are unqualified are in certain jobs. Okay, once again, thinking about our government. Um, And it'd be like this. If someone was like, Jamie, I love the way you talk about the planets. Would you want to come run NASA? I'd be like, no, no way. First, I'd be like, oh, thank you. Okay. But second of all, I would be like, I'm not qualified to run NASA. Okay. All right. But it's going to start showing up. Like, we already know these people are unqualified in these jobs. Um, but it's going to start becoming unbearable how unqualified, people are in their jobs. Okay. Which again is going to cause us to talk differently about things, to really, you know, go back and have a deep appreciation for people who do things for a long period of time. Um, go back to this idea of, working at things every day, I think I would say, and not like slaving away. Um, it's nothing like that, but like, oh, this is what you do. Like going back, trusting farmers, going back, trusting, you know, stewards of the land or stewards of the ocean or stewards of the water. Um, People who do make the military a career, um, versus Fox News host, right? And this really came apparent, which I mean, it always was, but unfortunately, there was a raid in California on the cannabis farm, and unfortunately, a man died. Um, and as someone who has not been in the military, I played capture the flag a couple times at YMCA day camp. That's, as much strategery as we had in these things. If you are going into a raid or any sort of mission, I would hope that you would understand all the ways in and all the ways out in case they were closed off. You had an escape route. And the fact that that didn't happen just shows me how stupid, this is. And I know that I'm not, blowing up anyone's brain there, but it's going to start coming down. Mm. Like these things are going to keep happening. And this is important, okay? Because again, it's going to start causing that, oh, wait a minute, or that, aha, or, well, you said it was like this, or you said all those people were bad, or you said they're too expensive. And when they start running the numbers and they start seeing like building homes might cost $20 million versus giving ICE $45 billion, like all these numbers are going to start coming out. All these ahas, right? And it's not going to put people too much in this camp or that camp. We're always going to kind of see that division, right? Because we can call it duality. Um, but it's going to start, there's going to be more threads, I will say, where people are agreeing on things and just this deep division um isn't going to be so deep anymore. Um, because people do want life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? It doesn't mean that we won't have rules, regulations, checks and balances. Those are really important, okay? Um, but it's also this idea that it's not one way or the highway, or two things can be true at the same time, right? Where do we find that balance? What part of duality works versus doesn't work, right? Um, Whew, I can feel this energy coming in. Um, and so I hope that this maybe will give you guys a little bit of levity to zoom out. We're in these retrogrades, Saturn, Pluto, Neptune, soon to be Mercury, 4 planets retrograde. It's not unheard of, but at this time, it's really going to make us go back over, and especially with Uranus into Gemini, things are shifting pretty quickly. Okay. So don't be afraid to talk about the Jeffrey Epstein case because we owe it to the survivors or any survivor of SA, right? Or sex trafficking or anything like that. Um, the same thing. And the thing is like that Diddy case, right? Everyone watched that and we're just like, how did they get off? This stuff isn't going to go away, right? And the fact that, the Trump campaign did a bang up job really making that part of the cornerstone. It's it's just too much to walk back. Um, but it's also okay that even if you're not going out and saying a bunch of stuff to say in your heart that you do believe the survivors, right? You do believe they will get justice, right? And we'll see how that looks. We'll see how that looks. I don't want you guys to lose hope just because the way we think justice should look or atonement, and it's not happening that way in real time, that it's not going to happen or that it's not happening. Okay. People can't, you can't outrun death. Okay. You can't outrun these things no matter what. Okay. So it's very helpful if you can get into that heart space and tell those people, the survivors, you believe them. If you get into that heart space and thank all the people who might have different beliefs than you are now stopping to question, wait, what's going on? Just that little bit tips those scales. Just that little bit stops that paradigm. Just that little bit resets the energy. And that's where we are. Okay, friends, I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to go see if my thing is charged so I can go do yard work. That's why I'm wearing this bright shirt, but also maybe I'm wearing this bright shirt because we're in an aha moment. Could be that too. All right, like and subscribe. Please share with your friends. If you have any questions, just reach out below. You can find me on Instagram at Independent ST Nola, and then also over at Seasons and Ritual on Instagram as well. Okay, till then, it is a Tuesday. I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. We're going to keep our eyes on the weather to see if we get into tropical depression or not. I don't know. Hopefully not. But till then, I'll see you guys soon.